Lazy D here. Today I'm going to be working on this 2020 Honda Pioneer 700. This video is going to include pretty much all the service information you need to service just about everything on this machine. If you're interested in seeing one section of this, I'll have it separated into sections. So if you want to use a slider at the bottom to find exactly what you're looking for right now, go ahead and use it. I'm going to include all the torque specs, fluid capacities, and fluid specifications. If you find this video useful or helpful, please like, comment, or subscribe. It really helps the channel. Here are the items I'm going to be covering in this video. I'm going to do the engine oil and filter, the front differential oil, rear differential oil, air filter, spark plugs, checking and cleaning the spark arrestor, an overall inspection. I'm not going to change the coolant or the brake fluid, but I'm going to show you how to do that. Some of these things are not recommended at the annual interval. A lot of maintenance kits that are available, if that's how you're getting these parts, are going to include stuff that isn't really recommended every year, but enough of it is easy to do. So I would recommend annually doing all this stuff. If you're going over the 600 miles and the 100 hours in a year period, you probably want to look in your owner's manual and get a better idea of the service intervals for items so that you can make sure you're not overdoing it or underdoing things. I'm also going to do a video on valve adjustment. It is not going to be in this video, but if you look through my videos, I'll put a link in it in here. So if you want to do your valve adjustment, you can see that separately. Here's the parts I got to do this job. There's a lot of maintenance kits available online, eBay, Amazon, I'm sure other places. I like to get the ones that have the Honda branded parts. So what I have here is 4 quarts of Honda 1030 GN4 oil. The oil filter, this is a crush washer for the drain plug. There's also, it's kind of an interesting drain plug on this one. One of these washers is for the drain plug, and then, one of these O-rings is for the drain plug. 2 of the O-rings are for the oil filter cover. 4 pints of gear oil. This is going to be for the front and rear diff. 2 spark plugs and an air filter. Part of any good maintenance plan is going to be to clean your vehicle whenever you're going to service it like this. It makes a big difference in the long run to clean everything as best you can. You can see all the components you're working on a lot better, and you're not going to get any debris, especially if you're going to do something like a valve adjustment. You're going to have your air filter out, you're going to have the spark plugs out. You really want to take the extra time and clean these. We've all seen machines that live on ranches get pretty caked in mud and manure and debris, and it really takes a toll, especially on the frames and a lot of these undercarriage components. You can see here I'm taking the skid plates off. After I get these off, I'll take a compressed air nozzle and just blow out anything I can, and sometimes it's surprising how much dirt comes out. This one's not the dirtiest, but part of my work is I clean every machine, and then I charge a customer to do this, but I feel like I do a really good job cleaning them all out. As you saw in the clip of me cleaning this thing off and getting it up on the rack, I'm going to be doing my work on this rack. You don't need this. This just makes it easier for me. What I'm doing right now, before I do the engine oil change, this thing was sitting here cold overnight. I'm going to let this thing warm up for about 5-10 minutes. That way when I drain the oil, it flushes a bit quicker and gets more contaminants out. If you get under your machine, you're going to see, so mine, I've taken the skid plates off. There's 3 skid plates, one under the front differential, one kind of under the middle, and one under the rear differential. Around the perimeter and some across the middle of these skid plates, there's a bunch of 10mm bolts. So if you may have seen in the time lapse when I was cleaning this, that I took the skid plates off. I think it's a good idea anytime you're doing an annual service to take as much off as you can and really blow and clean everything out. If you leave dirt and debris and grass and stuff in your frame, water's going to stay there and not dry that well, and eventually your frame and a bunch of components are going to start to rust, and over time that can make a big difference. So if you're not going to remove your skid plate, there is a access hole here that can be taken off. It's like a plate that has 4 10mm bolts. Once you get there, there's a 17mm headed drain plug here. We're going to take this out and drain the oil. On this drain plug, there's a crush washer and an O-ring. Your kit should come with these. You're going to want to replace these before putting the drain plug back in. Got my drain plug here with the new O-ring and crush washer on it. I put a little bit of oil on the O-ring real quick. I'm going to go ahead and slip this back in and tighten it up. I'll put the torque spec here. After I've got my oil drained and my drain plug put back in, I'm going to get at the oil filter here. If you come in from your passenger side, pop your seat, just lift up in the middle and the front, pull towards the front. There's going to be this rubber flap here. I'm going to fold this back. Yours will probably be clipped at the tabs. You're going to want to put it back in that way. And down here, that is your oil filter and the cover. That bolt is a 12 millimeter headed bolt or hold down, and I'm going to go ahead and take that out. You may see, because I have my skid plate out, there's going to be oil that drains out of this, and because my skid plate is out, I put a drain pan. Either way, you're going to want a drain pan, but this is one of the reasons why it's nice to take the skid plate all the way off, is that this oil is just going to drain in this drain pan, and I can dump it later instead of all over the frame and in your skid plates and stuff. Will be dripping for days. Okay, so the threads are out. Now I got a little pocket screwdriver. Try to put in this seam here that's opened up. There's little pry tabs. It's hard to see, but there's little protrusions out the outside of this. So if you need to pry on them, there's space to do that. You want to be very careful while you're prying here. You don't want to mess up this aluminum housing on either end. So just take your time. There's quite a bit of oil, so it shouldn't be stuck too tight. I'm going to let it drain here for a second. I'm going to pull all this out together. You can pull it one piece at a time, but if you can see in between the filter and on that hold down, there's a spring. It's pretty easy to lose that. So if you can keep it all together, you'll have better luck keeping all these parts in one piece. I got my oil filter out. There's a couple of things we're going to need to change. So we're going to change the oil filter, obviously. This O-ring, which is here on the filter housing cap, and this other smaller O-ring that actually goes on this bolt. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this bolt out. You can see here's the O-ring we're going to change. I'm just going to use a pocket screwdriver, get behind it. Slide that off. Get our new one on gently. Don't stretch it more than you need to. Okay, now that's out. I'm going to pull this cap off. So there's a couple components here. There's the cap. This is where we're going to change the O-ring. I'll do that real quick. Same thing, pocket screwdriver. Slip this on. A little bit of oil from this filter. Some people prefer to use brand new clean oil. I have no problem using a little bit of old oil to lube up these O-rings. The easiest way to put this together is once you have these O-rings replaced, I'm going to go ahead and put this, and I'm not going to seat this O-ring yet. It's going to make it easier for me to thread this back in once I get it pushed back in the engine. So once I have this bolt through, I'm going to go ahead and put this spring on first, touching the lid, and then this washer on the cap. So what this spring and washer does is holds the engine oil filter tight to the engine case. So I'm going to go ahead and slip this oil filter on now. And now with these O-rings lubed up and the new filter in, this is ready to thread back into the engine. So I'm not going to push this cap all the way through yet. It'll make it a little bit easier for you. When you're pushing this up against the engine, it's really important that you keep this cap or cover as square as you can to the engine. It's quite easy to nick a piece of this O-ring and you'll have an oil leak right away. So gently gonna get this started. Start the threads in the engine here. Sometimes you just spin the cap. I'm spinning the bolt head right now. I'm gonna go ahead and use my ratchet to tighten it down. If you feel any abnormal resistance, stop and try again. You're gonna feel a little bit when this O-ring starts to seat. That's normal. As long as everything's square, it's gonna seal fine. Now I'm gonna tighten this down. I'm gonna go ahead and put the torque in here. I'm comfortable doing this by hand. You may wanna get a torque wrench if you're not. Obviously dispose of your oil filter in a proper manner. These O-rings, although they are used, I would hang on to these. It's nice to have an extra set of these because you probably will rip that O-ring, especially the bigger one, on accident one time. And if you have one of these in your back pocket or a spare, it's real nice to have. Or at least start the engine to make sure the oil filter is not leaking before throwing this away. After everything's tight, definitely wipe off, or I just use brake clean. Spray off any oil so when you start this up, you're not questioning whether you have a leak or not. So now I'm going to fill the oil under your driver's seat. This is going to be where you're going to fill the oil, and this dipstick down here is going to be where you check the oil. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put the fluid capacities up here. It's a little bit different for complete engine disassembly, oil change with a filter and oil change without a filter. I'm going to start by pouring in 3 quarts into here. It's pretty easy to overflow this cap, so make sure you pour slow. And then I'm going to start the engine and I'll show you how to check the oil. With 3 quarts of oil in, I'm going to go ahead and put my cap back on. I'm going to take my funnel out, put the cap back on, and then I'm going to run this. Honda says to correctly check the oil, you should run it for 3 to 5 minutes and then leave it off for 3 to 5 minutes before you check it at the dipstick down there. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've ran the engine for a few minutes and then I've let it sit for a few minutes. The dipstick is here. I'm going to unthread this. There's some confusion sometimes with dipsticks like this that are threaded, whether you're supposed to thread them in and check them or just check them without threading it in. In the owner's manual, it says that you should not thread this in when you check the oil. So I'm going to pull it out, wipe it off, and now our oil check is just going to be pushing it in here until it would be where the threads start, and then pulling it back out. And here's mine. It's pretty close to the middle. I'm going to get it up to the full line. I'm going to add about another half quart, so my total is going to be 3.5 quarts. After this is done, make sure this O-ring is still on this dipstick. Sometimes these will stick to the casing down there and it's easy to knock them off, so keep your eyes peeled for it. Next thing I'm going to do here is replace the rear differential oil. Here's the fill plug. This is a 17mm head. Down underneath here, you'll have a skid plate if you haven't taken it off already. There's 6 10mm headed bolts you can take off. I would recommend doing that. There's a pretty good chance you're going to spill some oil into that skid plate anyway, so this will help you keep everything cleaner. This drain plug is a 10mm head. I'm going to go ahead and pop that out. While this is draining, I'm going to go ahead and open up the fill plug. This might help it drain a little bit quicker, but it does take a little bit for this thicker oil to drain out. So I've put a new washer on my drain plug. Most kits don't come with this. The size of this washer is an M8. If you're going to be servicing your machine regularly, I would recommend going on Amazon or something like that and getting like an assortment of these drain plugs. I like these ones that are aluminum on the outside and rubber on the inside. I've had real good luck with them. It's not a huge deal if you don't replace your crush washer every time. It's just a little bit of peace of mind. These things are pretty cheap. If you're going to reuse it, make sure you're keeping an eye to make sure you don't have a leak later. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down. I'll put a torque spec up here. I got my drain plug back in and torqued with the new sealing washer. I'm going to put gear oil in it. I'll put the spec up here. This is just the stuff that came in my kit, some 80-90 gear oil. It says, you'll see it's like less than one of these bottles. It's about 5 ounces. I'm also leaving my drain pan underneath here while I do this, so that when I spill like that, it does not spill all over the ground. And then the fill level for this is until it's even with the bottom of the threads. What I like to do is fill my oil. Sometimes it'll look like it's overflowing. It's pretty thick, so it might take a while to get around the whole gear case. So I'm going to keep filling it, and I'm going to spin the tires as I do that to help get it around the gearbox. I'm probably going to waste a little bit of oil here, but I'd rather have it at the right level than go low. So I can see the levels right there. It's not pouring out, but it's right at the bottom of the threads, so that's perfect. Honda does recommend getting a new O-ring for this cap. Most of the time you're not going to do that, but you should be aware that it may be something you want to have around. So I'm going to go ahead and put this cap back on and torque it. I'll put the torque up here for you. Moving on to the front differential. Same thing as on the rear as on the front. There's a skid plate that's normally here. The front one uses 4 10mm bolts and some special washers to hold it up there. I would recommend taking that out, so just a little bit cleaner when you're done. So everything we're getting access to here is on the driver's side. Down here at the bottom is our drain plug. Up here at the top is the fill cap. The drain plug's a 10mm, fill cap's a 17mm. I'm going to go ahead and remove both of these and let everything drain out. My oil is still slightly draining, but the vast majority has come out. So I'm going to go ahead and put my drain plug in. You can really wait as long as you want. This will keep dripping for quite a while. I'll go ahead and put the torque here for the drain plug. Now I'm going to pour my oil in here. It says it should take about 22.5 ounces. I'll put that up here. Just like I did in the back, it's a lot easier if I spin the wheel while I turn this, because the ring gear is right by the fill hole, and when you try to fill it, it takes a while for it to drain around that. So this is gonna, you'll see I'm gonna spill some anyway. It's pretty tough to not spill any. But the fill level for this is to the bottom of the cap. So now this is full. I'm sure you saw I spilt quite a bit. It's pretty tough to fill from this angle. If you can squirt up in the right upper portion, you'll have a lot better luck getting the oil to stay in there. So if you have a little bit of extra gear oil on hand, it's nice to be able to top off. But the level we're looking for is level with the bottom of the threads. I'm gonna go ahead and put this cap back on and then wipe everything clean. I got a little bit of overflow going on here. I got my bed propped up. The hood shocks failed on this one. I got a new one coming. But the next part of this video here is going to be checking the air filter. And it's important that we check it and clean it or replace it more frequently than every oil change. We at least need to check it. If you're living in dusty environments and operating in dusty environments, it's going to increase the maintenance you need to do on this. Before I open up the box to look at the air filter, you're going to want to take a second and inspect these boots on both sides of the throttle body. If these become damaged, you're going to suck unfiltered air into your engine. It's going to score up the walls of your cylinders and wear out your piston rings, and you're going to be doing a top end rebuild. So just make sure when you're checking your air filter, you're actually looking around at the whole intake system and looking for damage. So to access our air filter, there's 6 clips on top of this box here. You should be able to push off with your thumb. pop this cover off, oh, look what we got here. Pretty dirty. Looks like a mouse has even started making a nest. This is a pretty common occurrence to see. The filter doesn't look too plugged up. I can still see a lot of the foam element. If your filter, you'll see a lot of times when they're dusty, the dust will like cake onto the filter. You should be cleaning it. If this is covered by 30 to 50% of that caked on dirt, you're gonna wanna start thinking about cleaning it. It's a good idea to have a few spares of these. You can just replace them, but you can clean them as well, as long as the foam's still in good condition. I'm gonna go ahead and take this filter out. It's a Phillips headed hose clamp that goes around to holds it onto the intake boot here, or the intake, the intake boot. And I'll show you oiling and installing the new one. I've got my old filter removed from the air box and my new filter sitting in this bag. And I have a scale here. These filters need to be oiled. If you clean them and let them dry, or even if they're new, they need to have air filter oil put into them. The spec from Honda is to use their Honda air filter oil or an equivalent. So I have this Lucas foam filter oil. Honda's recommendation is 20 grams. So I have a scale here. This is the bag it came in. I cut up in the top, and I'm going to put the oil inside the filter, and then I'm going to massage this all around to spread it everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the scale, tear the scale, and then add some filter oil. There's 10, 19, well, 25 I got. So it's a little bit more than they call for. It's going to be fine. I'm going to massage that in, and then we can swap the filter. There's some pieces inside the old filter where we need this clamp and the piece inside. So that's enough. Now to get these are kind of tricky, but we're going to need this hose clamp. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And then this old filter, we're going to need this cage from the inside. So I'm going to push that down, trying to keep it as clean as possible. I'm going to roll it kind of off that last edge. So you can see I got some crap from the old filter on my gloves here. I'm going to go ahead and change my gloves real quick so I don't get the new one dirty. So the new filter, I'm going to push this over. It's a little bit tricky to get these up, especially once you get to the edge here. A little pocket screwdriver might be helpful. I got one sitting right here. Get underneath there and kind of pop this up over that edge. Be careful not to puncture the foam or anything. Once you get started, should be able to kind of roll it over like this. Then make sure this nub in the back is lined up and pressed in. And then this hose clamp back on. And now this filter is ready to go back in. If you're going to clean your filter, they recommend using a low flash point solvent. So if you know what that means, let me know. Put it in the comments. I don't know if they intended for that to be like diesel or gas or something, but I'm sure they also have a cleaning agent. So you could look for any sort of branded foam air filter cleaner would probably be great. After you rinse these out, you use that cleaner, rinse them out with warm water. You're going to want to let these air dry before re-oiling them. Got the air filter back in. Took a little bit of time and shot backed out this air box to get all that mouse nest out of here. I'm going to go ahead and put this lid back on and just snap these 6 clips back on, and you're good to go. There's one more thing you may want to, well, you should check. On the bottom of the air box down here, there's the air box drain, and you can just take this off by hand. There's a little tension clip here. You can see mine's got a little bit of oil in it and some crud. I'm going to pour this out. You want to keep this clean. This is also a good drain if you think you might have gotten any water in your air box. You can pop this off, but you definitely want to leave this on for normal operation. Here I'm going to show you how to service your spark arrestor. This unit here is the spark arrestor. These 3 bolts are what hold it on there. You may want to consider doing this if these look like they're super rusted and you're not having an issue. There's a chance you're going to break these off. So be very careful while you're loosening them. If you start doing this early in a machine's life, you're not going to have the problem of them seizing on, but a lot of people go a long time without ever checking them, and they're pretty easy to break off. So if they are a little bit more rusty, you may want to spray some rust penetrant back behind here to try to get on the threads a little bit. Go very slow. If you get them started and then you think it might be getting tighter, you may want to go back forward for a minute and then go back again and really take your time working them out. If you start this early though, these bolts should last pretty good. They're pretty hard bolts. So with my bolts out, I should be able to just wiggle this and pull it out. And all we're looking for is that this screen is clean. Even if you don't think this is caked up, it's a good idea to check it once in a while, because packing can come out of the muffler and end up in here and kind of partially plug the exhaust. There's a crush washer behind here. They do recommend replacing it every time. I've had very good luck reusing them a few times. So, but to clean this, you're just going to take a wire brush and just wipe this clean. As long as it's all clear, you're good to go. I'm going to recommend putting a tiny bit of anti-seize. Is going to help you in the long run. And tiny bit is actually, you know, a tiny bit. You don't have to cake these things. Just a little bit like that is more than enough. The bolts are pretty small. I'm going to tighten them up, and I don't think there's a torque spec. If there is, I'll put one in here, but when I read through the manual, it just said securely tighten. Next thing I'm going to do here is replace the spark plugs. If you go under the bed on the driver's side and the rear here, the spark plugs, there's two, one straight from the top and one from the side. They look accessible here. It's very difficult to change them, and it's kind of messy to try and change them when you got these covers on that have dirt and stuff on them. So I'm going to show you the way I recommend doing it. You can try to struggle with it here. I'm not going to show you that. All you got to do, these two panels, there's one in the back and one in the front here that can be removed. So this back panel, let me zoom out a little bit. There's a Phillips head up here, and then there's a few of these push pin style clips around the perimeter. I think there's about 5 in this back panel. And then this front panel under the seat, just the driver and middle will come out. You don't have to remove the passenger side. So there's a few Phillips headed screws. These are like a number 3 Phillips, the little bit bigger size. There's 4. So there's 1, 2. This one's between the rear and the front one. 3, and then 4 here. And then just around the perimeter of this, there's a bunch more of these push clips. Even up under the panel here, behind where the seat belt's bolted down, there's one back there you're gonna have to get out. The two tools I'm gonna use to do this are this push pin clip. I just push this in and pop each one of these out. I pull them up a little bit, then I can pop the bottom out. And then this impact with the number 3 Phillips on it. So I'm not gonna show you taking all of them out, but take these 2 panels out and you'll have a lot more access. With the 2 covers off, a ton more access. You can see it's pretty dusty in here. We're gonna have the spark plugs out, and the combustion chamber is gonna be kind of exposed to debris. So before I start doing the spark plugs, I'm gonna get compressed air. I'm gonna blow this out as best I can so I'm not dropping any contaminants into the engine. I'm ready here to pull the spark plug wires off. When you do this, make sure when you're pulling on these, you pull on the boot up here, not on the wire. So I'm just gonna twist and pull there. It's a little bit tougher to get this other one, but if you get underneath it, kind of push up. This insulated boot has like a 45-degree angle in it. You can kind of get your finger up in there and kind of wiggle and push, and you'll get it off. So just don't pull on the wire, it can damage them. These spark plugs are a normal 5/8 spark plug size, this kind of standard size. To get on the lower one, it's real easy with just the ratchet and the socket to get on there. For the upper one, the one that comes from the top, I'm gonna use a swivel and about a 4-inch extension. If you look at this plug up on the top, this, when you try to look at it exactly straight up, the seat belt kind of interferes with it a little bit. So I'm gonna use that swivel to get in there and get on there and get it out. It's pretty easy to crack a spark plug if you're not square on them. So try to get whatever tool setup you're using to sit on there nicely without pushing against the frame or that seat buckle. If you heard that click, you want to make sure when you're pushing these back on, you get a good positive engagement from the clip in the back. Here's the two existing spark plugs I removed. They look pretty good. The one that was on the exhaust side is a little bit dirtier than the one that was actually in the cylinder. Probably pretty normal. I'm going to put the spec in here somewhere, what spark plugs are required. It's different for different model years, so take a look at that. And some of them only have one spark plug, just the one in the cylinder head. Okay, to start our vehicle inspection, I have my vehicle up on a lift, right? You need to at least get the front up off the ground and the back up off the ground and take the wheels off. Before we take the wheels off, I'm gonna feel at each wheel, like 3 and 9 o'clock, and then 6 and 12, and I'm gonna feel for any looseness. And then if there is some, I'm gonna shake it around and look where that looseness is coming from. A lot of times you see ball joints, steering components, or bushings that wear out, and you want to catch that as early as you can. So after I do that at each wheel, I'm going to take the fronts off. You could leave the backs on. The reason I'm taking the fronts off is to inspect the brakes. The rear brake on these is on the rear drive shaft, so you don't need to get the wheels off to see it. These are all 19 millimeters. With the wheels off, now we can see the brakes. We're inspecting the rotor and the lining thickness on the pads here. These Hondas actually have pretty good sized brake pads and rotors, so pretty long life you'd expect out of them, but you still want to inspect these pretty frequently, at least annually. I'm gonna look in here while we're looking at the brake stuff. There's a lot of steering components you want to look at. Your inner and outer tie rod ends here. These bushings that we felt. You can see some of the cooling hoses in here. They have hose clamps on them. Maybe put your eyes on those. Our coolant level is here. I'll put the spec here, and then I'm gonna talk about the cooling a little bit later. Look at our coilover. Way up there is your voltage regulator, or voltage rectifier. This can get packed up with mud and don't burn these up. You want to make sure these are clean. So if you didn't get it when you're washing, get an air nozzle in there or a wire brush or something and clean this out. It's a heat sink. This is our front differential case. We're just looking probably at the CV joints and kind of axle shafts and everything, making sure the boots aren't torn, looking for any damage on anything. As you come around, our brake fluids here. I'll put the spec up for the brake fluid. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later too. And just kind of any cables. Here's your identification tag if you're looking to identify your model. In the back, there's a little bit more to see, but kind of while we're inspecting everything, we want to, look at everything. So exhaust, you can see some electrical connections to some of the shifting mechanism stuff up there. All your throttle body and hoses going to and from that. Here's your rear brake from the other side. Looking at our exhaust and, just kind of taking a time to look around at everything and just look for deficiencies and kind of get to know your machine is what we're trying to do. So the rear brakes are in here. If you wanted to inspect this, you would take this bolt out. It looks like it's a 12 millimeter, I'd say, might be a 14. I'll put it in here. And this will pop up and out, and then you can look at the pad thickness. You can also, if you look around with a little light, you can kind of see in here and then up top and in the bottom. So I'm not going to take it off, but if you wanted to, pretty easy to get at. There's some grounds and things right here. So just kind of take a look around at everything while it's up in the air. It's another reason I like to get it up on the rack, is I can actually get underneath here and look at any cables and hoses and wiring harness. You want to make sure there's no, you know, corrosion on brake lines and things. So the more you look at and get to know your machine, the better you're going to recognize any issues and be able to correct them before they're a problem. Something to not forget to check in here: check your radiator, make sure these fins aren't plugged. If you can, or if they are plugged, you can. There's a way to pop this grill out and blow it out with air. I'm going to reattach your wheels and torque them. I'll put the torque spec up here. The aluminum wheels are 80 foot-pounds. The steel wheels are 98 foot-pounds. Back here at the master cylinder, I want to shine a light on checking the fluid level on the brake system here. The max line for this is way up here, and the minimum line's way down here. We can see by the color of this being like kind of yellowish, orangey a little bit, that there's plenty of fluid. Honda recommends replacing the brake fluid every 2 years. It's a pretty in-depth procedure. Takes a lot of time, and sometimes if you don't have a vacuum bleeder, it's going to take 2 people. So I tend to shy away from this, but you don't want to under service it. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to test this real quick, so I know I'm good, and just on an annual basis test this until it's actually due to be replaced. So I'm going to go ahead and take this rubber cap off the master cylinder here. It's pretty tight. It's kind of hard to work with. Once that's off, I can take this cap off. It's just like a quarter turn kind of thing. Now that I have this exposed, I have this tool, and I'll put like a link if you're interested in getting one of these tools. I have it set for .4 fluid, and I'm going to test it here and see if I can get it on camera. This is just going to test for moisture. So let's see if I can zoom in here. It's saying it's in the okay range. So until this gets up a little bit higher, maybe another year or so, I won't change it. The second thing I'm going to do here, so you can get these like copper check tabs, and what this is if you have brake fluid that's getting acidic, it'll start eating the inside of the brake lines, and that copper will be in the fluid. So it's just a little tab that I'm going to dip in here. You get a little bit of brake fluid on it, and there's a little, let's see if I can get it on camera. There's a little patch on the end of this thing. You'll let it sit for 60 seconds, and you can compare it to this chart on the back. And if you get up within, you know, starts turning purple, you're going to want to change your brake fluid. Like I said, Honda's recommendation is every 2 years. The factory recommendation is probably the best method, but it's quite a bit of work. So if you want to kind of get around it or do that less often, find some methods that you can verify that the brake fluid's good, and just keep an eye on your fluid level and everything will be fine. To check our coolant, we're just going to pop the hood open. You're just going to turn these 2 quarter turns and push the hood away from you. Here's our radiator cap. Make sure if you're going to open this is cool and there's no pressure in the system. If you can squeeze this hose, that's a good sign that there's not a lot of pressure. If this thing's really hard to squeeze, there's pressure, but if it's cold, you should be good. So I'm going to push down and turn it counterclockwise. Open this up. Yep, there's coolant. It's the right color and it looks clean. The reservoir down here, kind of hard to see. Hopefully you can see down there. There's a min and a max line for the coolant level. If you need to add coolant to this, you're just going to open up the top of your coolant reservoir here, dump it in here until it's at the max level. If you're losing coolant, you're going to want to inspect probably, you know, hoses and things, and your water pump to see if the mechanical seal has failed. Honda recommends replacing the coolant every 2 years in the owner's manual. This is if you buy it for like a ATV or side-by-side, they're going to sell you this HP coolant. It's a type 2. If you get it for like a Honda newer vehicle, this blue stuff, you can get it in bulk a lot cheaper, but this is just a non-silicate ethylene glycol. Interestingly, on the one for vehicles, it does say good for 5 years or 60,000 miles. So, you know, if you really want to follow their directions, that's great, and I'm sure it's better, but I would feel comfortable doing this every 5 years and even condition-based. I'm underneath the center part of the machine here. If you want access to drain your coolant, you're gonna have to take, there's a skid plate that normally goes around the frame here. Let me zoom out. Goes around the frame here, and it has 10mm bolts, maybe 10 or 12 of them. If you're gonna drain your coolant, here's the front of the engine. You can see the cooling hose going to the suction side of the water pump here. This lowest bolt is a drain. So if you wanted to drain all your coolant out and change it, you'd take this out. It's an 8mm head. I'll put the torque value when you put it back in right here. I also want to point out while I'm down here that if you check your water pump and there's coolant leaking out of this little hose right here, that is a weep hole from the cooling system. And that means that the mechanical seal on the water pump has failed and you're gonna have to replace it. You would see the coolant coming out down here. So this is easy to see, this thermostat housing with those plastic covers I took off to get to the spark plugs. Here's a video of the thermostat housing. This is your air bleed screw. If you're going to change your coolant, this is where you would open this 10mm headed screw, let the air out while you're filling it with coolant until coolant comes out of here. Then you close this down and put the torque spec for this right here. With your hood open, you're going to be able to access the fuse box. I just want to point this out real quick. If you didn't know where it is, you just push this clip, pull the cap off. There's, looks like 4 relays back there. And then if you push the front of this cap, here's some fuses and they're labeled what they're for. So these are mini blade fuses. There's a few spares on the side here. Wouldn't hurt to throw a little assortment bag in your glove box, but don't put oversized ones in, right? I also want to point out here, if you need to adjust your parking brake, the adjustment for that is right here. You may need an 8mm wrench to hold this nut, but then you can adjust this tighter by tightening it with the wing nut on the brake cable here. I'm going to show you real quick how to reset your maintenance reminder. So I'm going to turn my key on and I'm going to cycle through this menu. It's going to come up. It's going to show my fuel level here in a second. I'm going to cycle through. There's our clock. Here's our odometer, our trip odometer. This is our coolant temperature. So it says low right now. This is the hours the unit has on it. So here's our service interval that's counting down. So this one still has a while, but it's been a long period of time. That's why I serviced it. So if you want to reset it again, even if you didn't count this thing down until the light came on, you're going to get to this screen and then I'm going to hold this button down. I'm going to turn the key off and then I'm going to turn the key back on. And when I do that, you'll see it's going to blink. And that's going to reset our menu. So now if we go back to that service interval, it should be 600. Yep. So the next time this light's going to come on is going to be in 600 miles or 100 hours. And that's going to indicate our next full service. If there's anything you think I missed in this video, comment. I'll add stuff or fix stuff eventually. If this was helpful to you, please like, comment, or subscribe. And thanks for watching. No one's going to take better care of your machine than yourself, so you should learn how to do it and do it yourself. Because even if you're taking it to a dealer, you don't know who that dealer is paying to work on your machine. And if you really depend on it, you at least need to know what they're doing and verify that they're doing it. So thank you.